data science by its very nature tends to be innovative, but here we've got the cutting edge of the innovation. Innovation seems to be happening, according to this, mainly in Scotland and Wales. I'm sure it's more generalized than that, but we're going to find 4 presenters, 2 from Edinburgh, 1 from Glasgow, and 1 from Cardiff. Our first presenter is Mark Adams from the University of Edinburgh, and who wins the prize for the sharpest photograph on Zoom. Mark is going to talk about towards population level genetic studies in mental health. Mark.
All right, thank you. So I'm just going to talk about sort of what kind of resources that we're going to need for the next generation of genetic studies of psychiatric traits and mental health traits. So just to kind of give an overview, there's really been sort of huge progress in the last 10 years. If you look back to 2010, 2011, there were essentially no replicable findings in psychiatric genetics, and that's changed mainly due to the great increase in sample size. So studies now are showing, upwards of 100 or more loci or parts of the genome that are related to psychiatric disorders. So here I just have three traits: bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder, and schizophrenia. I'm just showing the good increase there. However, there's still lots of challenges, even for all the progress that we've made. The first is just in discovery. So if we want to understand the biology behind these traits, it turns out, even though we can pinpoint hundreds of places in the genome that are associated with psychiatric disorders, that's still just scratching the surface of the thousands or possibly tens of thousands of genetic variants that influence these traits. And it turns out that, sort of looking at power analysis, we might need something like 10 million cases in order to find most of the genetic variants behind these traits. The other big thing that we're kind of missing out is representativeness. So we're using consumer genetics companies and resources like UK Biobank, and we know that there's kind of an ascertainment bias that these people in these studies are not completely representative of the population. So we'd really like to, find resources where we can tap into more individuals, especially since we find that people who have mental health difficulties tend to have lower participation in our study cohorts. So I'm just going to briefly talk about 2 resources that we're developing in Scotland. The first is SHARE, which is a health register run by the NHS, and the other is using dried blood spot cards. So SHARE is a Scottish health register. It's open to anyone who lives in Scotland who's aged 11 or older. They give consent to link to their NHS data, and then this makes them potential research participants who can be contacted. Also importantly, there's a diversion of blood draw that can be used for genotyping. So through the NHS in Scotland, there's linkage to all kinds of data. Currently SHARE, the best linkage they have right now is to hospital care and prescribing data, but there's lots of potential to link that to these other rich data sets. So just to sort of give you an overview of how SHARE works. So if you're a participant, there's a website you go to register for SHARE. And you just need to put your name and birth date, and then the folks there are able to link you up with your NHS records. And then once you're in that system, you're eligible to be invited to take part in research studies. There's also separately from that a consent for the blood storage. So whenever people go in for routine care, there can be a diversion of their blood to storage, and makes that available for genotyping. So as part of our Pathfinder project, we're allocating genotyping for additional individuals in the Lothian area. And I think that's going to be around 5,000 or 6,000 additional participants that we'll be able to genotype for research. And then anyone accessing genotype data through SHARE will be able to access that as well. So for a researcher, you initially just submit a feasibility request. Once that's approved, you can put in your full application. The trickiest detail is just defining who exactly you want in the study. And then you can, of the people selected who match your criteria, you can invite them to take part in research. So on the form, the thing we're looking at doing is a little bit different. I think the way Share was set up is sort of intending that you would be recruiting patients who have a particular disease into your study, say for a clinical trial. In our case, we're doing a case control study. So we just laid out all of the criteria that we'd have for someone to be a case with depression, and then controls, so people without depression or other disorders. And they have information on both the read codes and ICD codes. So both of those can be submitted to get the case control sample that you want. And then finally, I'll just say a little bit about the Guthrie cards. So these are cards that are used for blood detection of inborn errors in metabolism. And basically every baby since 1965 in Scotland will have one of these cards that's sort of safely and securely shared. In Scotland, there's currently a research moratorium on the use of this data, but through our Pathfinder surveys, we've found that people seem very interested and open to having this resource accessed. And we've also conducted a few feasibility studies looking at DNA methylation. So this is where there's a methyl group that'll sort of be turning on or off a certain part of the genome, and finding that blood draw stored in a tube versus stored on these paper cards, you can get an equivalent signal. And we've also done a study with consented participants in the Generation Scotland cohort to go in and say we actually are able to find and match up cards to particular people. So I think this is the kind of resource that's potentially very powerful, because it's sort of a form of time travel, that we can get information on exposure that it'd be really hard to assess in any other way. So just thanks to everyone in Edinburgh and the Share team for making this possible.
Thank you, Mark. An excellent presentation. Questions? Let me see. From Archie Campbell. What type of genotyping? Is that GWAS?
Yeah, that's GWAS that they're doing.
Okay. Anything else? I got lots of questions about Share. Who does the consenting? Is that the GP or medical practitioner, or how is that done?
As far as consenting to take part in the study?
Yes.
Well, it's the participant themselves. So when they go into the GP clinic, there might be a leaflet about Share, and they just go to the website and sign up there.
Oh, that's very good. And there's no prompting by the medical fraternity at all?
I mean, maybe if GPs are really keen on it, they might mention it, but I think it's mainly through leaflets and posters in GPs.
And do they consent for all of the health data, or do they consent for specific data sets themselves?
Well, the consent is they're giving consent for the NHS to access their records to identify them as being eligible for a particular study. So they're not releasing the health record data to researchers. It's just used as an identification measure. But what we've asked for is to sort of get a basic, case control. So if we identify a participant who has depression, we just get 1-0. Do they have depression or not, rather than access to all of their health records.
Okay. Mark, thank you very much indeed.